If you struggle to turn your samples into beats, you are not alone. Recently I asked you to send me your samples that you've been spending hours and hours trying to use but just weren't able to turn into a beat. And I will be taking these impossible samples and turning them into 3 beautiful beats. So if you can't figure out what you're doing wrong when you're using samples, today's video is gonna help you understand what mistakes you might be making and what you can do differently. And by the way, help this video climb up that algorithm and hit the like and subscribe button. Big kisses all around for all those that do. So let's first start out with a sample from Leftovers. Now you might have noticed this already, but one of the issues with this sample is that it's in 3/4, meaning that each bar only lasts 3 beats. You can hear this if I just count along with the sample. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And as you probably know, most hip hop beats are produced in 4/4, where each bar has 4 beats. So here's an example of a beat of mine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And this might be why you're having a hard time using your sample. If you tried to use a 3/4 sample and just loop it, the timing would be completely off. As you can see, the loop ends before we reach the end of our second bar here. Now you could definitely change the time signature in your project settings and make a beat in 3/4. You'd have to program your drums completely differently and your beat would just end up sounding very different in the end. But just because you have a 3/4 sample, it doesn't mean you're gonna be stuck having to make a 3/4 beat. What you could do instead of looping is just break the sample down into smaller pieces. So with a sample, I literally chopped every single note. And from there, you can take your chops and create a new arrangement, one that fits the standard 4/4 time signature. You can see here what I did was I shortened this last chop so it's not as long as my other notes. This way everything fits nice and neat into each bar and I have myself a loop that I can use. And from here, I can start adding in more layers to turn this into a full beat. Moving on, let's take a listen to this sample from Unknown Individual. Now, as you can hear, this is a guitar sample. And the issue with samples like this is that by using it, we run the risk of making a guitar type beat. So if you run into a sample like this, here's my recommendation. All right, next up, we have a sample from Neo Raw. Now already there's an element in this sample that jumps out to me that seems to be problematic, and I think I know why Neo Raw struggled when trying to use it. If your sample has a droning sound in it, if there's a sound or instrument that's just playing one note constantly throughout the entire sample, this is gonna make it difficult to use. Let's re-listen to this sample so you can hear this better. Here we have that string that's constantly playing that single note and it's throughout the entire sample. The reason why this makes using the sample difficult is because now you have this amelodic monotone sound that you have to include in your beat since it's just all throughout the sample. So to make the beat sound good, you're gonna need to build other layers that are more melodic to help offset that monotone sound. And sometimes your sample just won't give you enough material to do that. You might be able to EQ this sound out, but depending on what the other instruments are in the sample, this just might not be possible. So instead of trying to figure out how to get rid of that monotone sound or work around it, I'm gonna take a different strategy here. I'm gonna go head on and I'm gonna sample that monotone sound and build my own beat around it. This is a technique that I showed you in an older video of mine showcasing the different techniques that the Alchemist uses in his beats. Link to that's in the corner. But this can be a powerful method when making beats using these types of samples. So what I'm going to do is find a piece of this sample where it's just that string playing and isolate it. As you can see, the problem that we have here is this part of the sample just doesn't really last that long. So here's a bonus tip. Whenever you have an issue where you have a short sound that you want to prolong, using granulizers can help you with this exact problem. This is a really powerful tool that comes with many DAWs. I know FL Studio has the Fruity granulizer that you can use. I did a video showing how you can use this tool to prolong your sounds. A link to that's also in the corner. But what I'm going to use instead is Pigments. This is a plugin that I recently purchased, and that's pretty much why I'm using it. I just want to feel like I got my money's worth. So as you can hear, this is why granulating is such a great technique. It can really help you make your sounds far more unique and interesting rather than just looping the sample as it is. So I have this layer in my beat, it's sounding great. The plan is to now add other sounds and patterns that are a bit more melodic. Otherwise, my beat will just end up sounding really monotone and boring. And there we go, I've turned this impossible sample into a beat. Lastly, we have Dane Vater Morgan's sample, so let's take a listen. Now, one reason why you might struggle with using samples is because the pieces feel too minimal. There are no sections in it where you're able to turn it into a full, complete sounding beat. But by taking multiple minimal pieces from your sample and then stacking them onto each other, you'll start to turn your sample into a full sounding beat. So let's take a look at how to do this with this sample. Here we have this guitar as the first instrument. By no means is this enough to make a full sounding beat, but this can just be our first piece. So here I'm going to isolate this section of the guitar and turn on keyboard mode. This will let me play this sound as if it were an instrument. This is also a great benefit of using an actual sampler. I know that many producers like to flip their samples in the playlist, but like I said in a video that I put out recently between the difference between newer producers and experienced producers, using samplers can really help elevate your production. Alright, so we have a pretty cool sounding bass line here by using our first piece of the guitar. Next up, let's take the next piece of our sample and use one of the notes as our next layer in our beat. And once again, my approach is similar here. I'm just going to be using the more minimal open pieces of my sample and enable keyboard mode. And here, all I'm doing is playing through the 12 different pitches on my keyboard while my bass line is playing to figure out which one of these will actually work with my bass layer. Alright, so it sounds like there were a few notes here that worked with my bass guitar pattern. Next, let's go ahead and create a pattern using this sound. So this beat's already starting to sound more and more full. Another really helpful tip when using this multi-layering technique is to pitch your sample up 12 semitones and use the exact same approach. This will help you fill up even more space since our sample is now sitting in a higher frequency space. Alright, so with these few layers that I have here, I think we have a great framework. Let's go ahead and add a few more layers into the beat, as well as our drums and our bass. And there we have it. Hopefully I've shown you that the impossible can be possible, or some other corny motivational cliche, whatever. If you need more help with sampling though, click the video that should be showing up on the screen right now. It's one of my best ones on sampling. And in case you want to check out any of the other videos that I mentioned during this one, a link to all of them are in the description box below. Hit like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this video. Head over to betterbeatmaker.com to check out my full online beatmaking course. My free drum kit is in the description box below, as well as a link to the Discord if you want to join my producer community. And I'll see you next time.